Today, we're diving into a really big idea, the collapse of the global order. We're talking about an entire system of international cooperation, one that was built over decades, that now seems to be fracturing right before our very eyes. So we're going to break down how we got here and what it all means for our future. Now, this is a pretty stark claim from The Economist. They're not just predicting a collapse sometime in the future. They are flat out declaring that an old order has already ended. It really sets a dramatic stage, suggesting we've crossed some kind of major threshold, maybe without even realizing it. That's a bold claim, so let's dig into the evidence.
So this is really the central question for our explainer, isn't it? What on earth went wrong with that dream of global cooperation? And maybe more importantly, what comes next? To understand that, well, we have to go back to see what it looked like at its peak.
To really get a handle on the collapse, we first need to appreciate just how high the peak was. So let's take a trip back to a time not so long ago that really felt like the dawn of a new era for solving problems on a global scale. Man, 2015 was a landmark year. I mean, in just a matter of months, the world came together in a way we'd never really seen before. Nations agreed on a massive plan to fund development. They launched 17 incredibly ambitious goals to end poverty and protect the planet, and they signed the historic Paris Agreement to fight climate change. The level of ambition was just staggering. Yeah, this period was seen as a kind of golden decade of hyperglobalization. The core belief was pretty simple. Our biggest challenges, climate, poverty, health, they don't respect borders, so our solutions can't have borders either. The optimism was something you could almost feel.
And then that optimism just slammed right into reality. A decade later, that shared vision from 2015, it's completely fractured. The gap between what was promised and what actually happened is, well, it's huge.
This slide just lays out the failure so starkly. On the left, you've got the 2015 vision. On the right, the cold, hard reality of 2026. Instead of hitting those 17 big goals, we're on track for just a tiny fraction of them. Instead of limiting warming, we've supercharged it. And instead of boosting global aid, we're looking at a multi-trillion-dollar deficit every single year. It's not just a miss, it's a complete reversal. And to put a number on it, a whopping 82% of the Sustainable Development Goals are either off track or have actually gone backwards. The vision for 2030 isn't just delayed. In a lot of ways, we're actively moving in the wrong direction. So what caused all this? Well, politics. A massive political shift. That spirit of globalism was replaced by this rising tide of nationalism, with America First being the most famous example. And look, this wasn't just rhetoric. It led to the U.S. pulling out of key global agreements and dozens of international organizations. When the world's most powerful nation starts actively dismantling the system it helped create, it doesn't just leave a gap, it creates a power vacuum that makes the whole structure unstable. In that vacuum, it has very real-world consequences. This isn't just about abstract political treaties. The breakdown of cooperation has a tangible cost, both in dollars and in human lives. $102 trillion. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering size of global debt today, and it's a direct result of this new era of economic instability. To put that in perspective, global debt is now equal to 93% of the entire world's economic output for a whole year. The world is basically mortgaged to the hilt, which makes it incredibly difficult to fund things like health and education. And this is where the human cost just becomes undeniable. 3.3 billion people, that's nearly half the planet, live in countries where their government now spends more money paying interest on debt than it does on education and healthcare combined. Think about that devastating trade-off. Economic pressure breeds instability. As that cooperative framework gets weaker, old rivalries just flare up again. The analysis points to 59 active, high-stakes conflicts happening across the globe, and every single one is a potential flashpoint for a much bigger crisis. This quote just perfectly captures the dynamic. The rivalry between major powers like the US and China creates these ripple effects that are felt everywhere. They're competing over supply chains, over influence, and it's often the smaller developing nations that are the ones who pay the price. So if the old order is gone, what's replacing it? Well, this analysis suggests we need a whole new vocabulary just to describe the world we're entering. This table really helps break it down. Multilateralism. That's the old way of doing things, working through universal bodies like the UN. That's fading. Then you have pluralism. This idea where rivals cooperate on a few specific issues seems pretty unlikely right now. So the model that seems to be winning out is minilateralism, smaller regional groups of like-minded countries. It looks like the future of cooperation is going to be smaller, faster, and a lot more exclusive. The old logic was all about hyperglobalization and global solidarity. The new reality, it's geoeconomic fragmentation and putting national sovereignty first. It's a fundamental shift in how the world works, moving from one interconnected whole to a collection of competing blocks. And all this brings us to the final and maybe the most important takeaway from this whole analysis. How do we navigate this new, fragmented reality? The answer seems to lie in letting go of the past. The final argument really hinges on this one word, nostalgia. It's that sentimental longing for the past, in this case, for that seemingly simpler, more cooperative world of 2015. The analysis poses this really powerful question. Is wishing for the cooperation of 2015 a viable path forward? Can we solve today's problems by just longing for yesterday's world? The conclusion is a blunt and resounding no. And this is the final takeaway. A quote from Canada's Prime Minister: "Nostalgia is not a strategy. It's a call to action, a warning against romanticizing a past that isn't coming back. The world has changed. The challenge now is not to mourn the old order, but to figure out how to navigate the new one."